Hi there everyone, welcome back. I know it's been really busy for you all today again. We've all been busy working behind the scenes and I'm hoping you're enjoying everything you're seeing. There's been some amazing presentations today and yeah, it's really good. So I'm hoping you're enjoying yourselves. I've been sitting in front of the fire in the lounge because it's very cold here at the moment. Another wet, windy, horrible day today. So I've been sitting in front of the fire watching all the presentations, and then I came into my craft room and realised I hadn't put my heater on. So it's a little bit parky in here, to say the least. So I'm going to keep cracking in a second to try and warm myself up a little bit. So today we're talking about embossing, and specifically we're talking about the humble embossing folder. I've got one technique which I really kind of am concentrating on, just to I think embossing folders are sometimes the forgotten tool. Sometimes they're not used to their full potential. So I thought today we'd concentrate on one little part of that. So I'm going to show you some bits and pieces as we go. So I'm going to flip back to my desk. Excuse the mess in here at the moment. I do have a class tomorrow. So it's forever, never stops. Okay, right, okay, so hopefully I've dispensed with lots of shadows and things that were created. It's always difficult when it's sort of this time of year. Oh, hang on a minute, let me tighten my arm. Right, okay, so let's get cracking. So as I said to you, what I want to concentrate on is our humble embossing folders. I'm just using a few today, just as examples really, just to show you some different things that you can do with them. But you'll see my sample uses the one of the duo set, which is the eucalyptus set. I thought these were so pretty, but I hadn't really seen a great deal done with them, to be honest. And I thought, well, you know, I think it's for this technique I'm going to show you, they worked really, really well. So you can see I've still got a little bit of ink in there. Look at that. I've cleaned all that off. Anyway, so here's the sample card that you would have seen in the preliminary PDF. So what we're going to do is we're going to create our background, and I don't know whether you can see that actually sparkles a little bit. I know it doesn't show in the photograph, but I'm not sure it will show on the camera either really, but it does have a little sparkle to it. It's better, you can see better there. All right, so we're going to see what you think. We'll have a little play. So the first thing I'm going to bring in is just a non-porous surface. So I'm just using a splodge mat here, which I've had for years and years and years, but you can use like something like an oven liner. You can use a plastic Polly Pocket type, you know, that you put your documents in, anything really that's non-porous. I'm sorry we're going to have a bit of a reflection of the lights up the top here, but hopefully that won't distract too much from what we're about to do. Okay, so I'm going to start creating my background. So I'm just starting off with a piece of just basic white cardstock. So this is normal thickness, it's not the thick one or anything, it's just our normal basic white cardstock. And what I want to do is to create a background. So I'm going to start off with 3 ink colours. So I'm using, you probably guessed it, Pretty Peacock, Lost Lagoon, and I've also used Pebble Path. Now I really love Pebble Path. It's got like a mauvey undertones in it, which is quite interesting. It was a bit of a surprise to me really. So it's quite nice to sometimes play with the colours, because sometimes they do have some sort of undertones in them that you don't really know about. I think Old Olive is another one that has really sort of yellowy browny undertones, and it's just brilliant. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my ink pads. If you've got reinkers, you could use reinkers, but I find for this technique probably the ink pads is your better bet, just because the ink isn't so runny. So because it's been soaked on the pads, it's obviously it's not like runny ink like it would be out of the bottle, so to speak. And I'm just going to take just a spritzer, and I'm just going to move my bit of card before I start. And I'm just going to spritz into it. It's just plain water, there's nothing else in it. Now sometimes I use one of the sort of palette knives just to kind of mix it around a little bit, spread it out a little bit. It means I don't have to use so much ink, but I can get it to cover a bigger surface. And always have a paper towel to hand. Okay, so the next one I want to do is just to pop my card into that ink. Just nowhere in particular, just dab it, lift it, dab it, lift it. So you're just getting some colour, and if you want to sort of particular area, just concentrate on that area just to pick up some colour. Okay, now you can see these lovely sort of purple undertones that start to come out of it. They're only very subtle, but they've got like a pinky sort of purple undertone. So really, really pretty. Okay, so I'm going to pop that to one side. I'm just going to grab my tissue and just wipe up my ink. So I'm going to repeat that now. So I'm going to use Lost Lagoon this time. Again, just a little bit of ink. You don't need huge amounts. I'm going to spritz the ink. And again, I'm just going to spread it around a little bit, just so it kind of covers just a bigger area. That's the only reason I'm doing that, really. And again, I'm just going to lay my card down. Every one you do will be different. So you know how Melissa and I love to get a bit inky sometimes. So this is one of those inky situations. Okay, and you don't be afraid to leave sort of white bits. It doesn't, you know, we want a mixture basically. Okay, so again, I'm just going to quickly wipe that over. This is why you want a non-porous surface, because you can just quickly wipe it up and get it out of the way. Okay, and this time we're Pretty Peacock. Now, this is one of my favourite all-time colours, and mixed with Lost Lagoon is just like a dream made in heaven for me. And I never put myself down as a bluey sort of person, but it's it certainly is. Now, this one will spurt a bit more because it's a darker colour. Of course, we know that it gets everywhere, so just bear that in mind. And I'm just going to, again, just move it around just to cover that bigger area. And I'm going to come back in and again pick up some of that blue. So I'm just literally just making a nice mottled kind of background. I don't mind if these sort of drips stay a little bit darker. If you're not keen on that, you can blot it with a bit of tissue. I like sort of the mix of the colours really. So I'm quite happy that that is now sort of where I want it to be. So I'm just going to wipe up my surface one last time. Okay, so the embossing folder I'm going to be using is, as I say, this florally one from the Eucalyptus Duo. The other one really is a eucalyptus, which is gorgeous. So what I want to do now, obviously this is narrower than my piece of card, so you can either cut it to the size of the card if it bothers you, but I actually quite like the you get like a tram line. Where's my card gone? Here it is. You actually get like a tram line down here where the embossing folder doesn't reach, and I quite like that because it added sort of another detail to it. But as I say, if you don't like that, you can get rid of it, or you can dry this before you emboss it and it isn't quite so obvious. Okay, but I'm going to emboss it while it is still sort of wet. It's not soaking wet, it's just obviously slightly wet. So what I want to do is I'm going to line up my piece with face down onto this section here. So it's the bit with the Stampin' Up logo on it. And I'm going to line it up with that black line. Okay, and then I'm going to overhang either side just by eye, roughly where it is. Okay, and then carefully close my folder. I can adjust it if it's not quite where I want it to be, or it's not quite straight, but using that black line at the top is just a really good guide to get that in the right place. Okay, she says, confidently as it moves. So just take a little bit of time just to get it in the right place. Okay, so now I'm happy with that. I'm just going to run it through my embossing machine which is sitting right next to me. Okay, so when I pop this out, you'll see the difference in colour between that centre panel and the side panels. Now these will obviously lighten a little bit as well once they're actually dry. I'm just going to move my splodge mat so that you don't get that horrible shadow. Don't need it for the moment. Okay, so these, as I say, these will dry a lot lighter than what they are, but they won't go quite as light as that middle section. Now, we're all used to using embossing folders to do the obvious, just to emboss. And as beautiful as they are, it's one of those things that you kind of, sometimes you just want to beef it up a little bit, and we can do all sorts of things. There's lots and lots of different techniques, but this is one technique which I really quite like. Now, I would advise that you allow this to dry before we move on to the next section, but obviously I haven't got that luxury. So here's one I produced earlier. You can heat it up with a heat gun just to speed up the process if you want to, but I've got one prepared so that we can move on straight away. Okay, now obviously this does warp a little bit. That's just the moisture that we've used from the water, but it will flatten, and especially once it's glued down. So I'm just going to quickly have a quick sip of drink. Talking too much. Okay, so that's my wet one. So this is going to be my dry one. So now what I'm going to use is our craft ink. So this is the Craft Whisper White ink refill. Now if you've got the pad, then you'll almost definitely want the refill because they do dry up. It's got a chalky consistency, so it dries incredibly quickly, but it also dries a lot lighter than when you put it on. So you just need to bear that in mind. So what I'm going to do is just going to pop a little bit onto just a block or whatever you want to. Oh dear, excuse me. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to grab is cotton buds. We always used to call these Q-tips years ago for cleaning your ears. I hate even thinking about that, but anyway. So they're just plain cotton buds. Now the reason I'm using cotton buds is because if you could use a dauber, but the daubers are quite large, and because of the you can't sort of see where you're going with it, I like to use these just for a little bit more precision. Another option is that you can also use your ink pad and sort of stroke it across all the embossed areas. Now the disadvantage to that is sometimes you can get ink onto your ink pad, so you no longer have a white ink pad, and also it's very hard to see where you've been, where you haven't been. It's a good starting point, but I certainly, I like to add a little bit more detail than that. The other thing as well, if this is still a little bit wet, then you can rough up the edges of your actual paper. So I'm going to take a Q-tip or cotton bud, whatever you want to call it, and I'm just using the ink at its level that it comes out of the bottle. So I haven't watered this down in any way, shape or form. It's literally just as it is. Okay, now before I start, I'm just going to explain what I'm going to do. I'm going to add ink to all these leaves and bits and pieces, but I'm hardly putting any pressure on it whatsoever. It's a really, really light touch, and I'm going to use little circular motions. So I'm going to start on a bigger leaf just to start me off. And I'm just going to work around all the bits and pieces that are embossed. Don't worry too much if you go over the edge. It doesn't matter. It will dry really light. You're not going to see it. And hopefully you'll start to see how it starts to pop off the page. Now, because this does dry a lot lighter, and because it's got that chalky consistency, you might want to do 2 or 3 layers of this. So I'm just going to work across. As I say, I'm hardly putting any pressure on here whatsoever. It literally is almost like a stroking motion, really. It's not, I'm not actually putting any pressure on it whatsoever. And I'm just picking up a little bit more ink every time. So don't worry if you go in the gaps, because once that dries, you're not going to see it. We're going to enhance the rest of it, okay? So don't worry too much. But just take your time. It's quite a nice, relaxing thing to do, actually. I quite enjoy it. Now, hopefully you can see on screen. I'm hoping you can. I've got my computer on here. I'll just have a quick look across. Yeah, I can see. Hopefully you can see it starting to pop out. So this technique is really good for bringing out all those details that you can't really see when it's sort of a mottled, sort of patterned background. So it's just a way to use the embossed parts just to sort of stand out just a little bit more. So again, just little circular motions. It's quite therapeutic, actually. It's quite funny. And what you'll see is it will start to pop out from the page. Okay, so I've done over with one layer now, so you can see it's just starting to pop just that little bit. Okay, now to get more depth into it, you want to just add a second layer, and depending on your colour underneath, you might need a third layer. It just depends on what colours you're using. Now obviously the darker the background, the more contrast you're going to get, but we're not looking at this being a completely jump out of the page at us. We literally just want it to be quite subtle, but so that you can actually see that beautiful embossing. Because as I say, when you emboss onto certain colours and certain backgrounds, you can't actually really see that embossing. So it's really nice just to kind of build it up as much or as little as you want to. It's quite a creamy consistency as well. It's not like, if you haven't used it before, it is really creamy as opposed to wet, although it is wet, but it is really creamy. So don't worry if you go in the middles in places, because that will just add to your background. But what we're concentrating on is the pieces that are actually embossed and are sticking out. Okay. So hopefully you can see that that is now starting to pop out of the page, and you can now see that lovely embossing background. Okay, now if you use Wink Stella and you want to add a little bit of sparkle like I have, all I do is literally paint over the top with my Wink Stella. However, if you have an old Wink Stella like I have here, which sort of basically doesn't have a great deal of life left in it, rather than throw it away, I tend to use it to pick up some ink and just add a little bit more, and you get that white, but you also get a lovely sparkle. Now I'm suspecting you won't be able to see the sparkle on the screen, but it does just add that hint of sparkle, and it's a really good way to use up the end of your Wink Stella. Just mark it so you know that it's your end one. All right, so I don't know that you can see the sparkle, but trust me, it's sparkling my end, so it's really, really pretty. Okay, so the rest of the background, again, you know I love my splatters, so it's very, very simple splatters on this one. So I'm just going to add a little bit of the Pretty Peacock, and I'm just using a normal paintbrush, an old paintbrush, tatty, used for all sorts of things, just to pick up a little bit of water. Not too much. I want it to be quite dark consistency, and then I'm just going to splatter onto the background. This is when you need to make sure you've got no cards or anything around you. Trust me, I've done it on more than one occasion. Okay, so once I've done that with my Pretty Peacock, I'm just going to bring in my white. So this is the rest of the white that I was just using a moment ago. Now I'm going to water this down very, very slightly because it is quite gloopy. But you do need to be careful, because if you water it down too much, it doesn't dry very well. So you would even need to use a heat gun, or sometimes I blot it if it's really, sometimes it can take literally a day to dry if you add a little bit too much water. So just that tiny amount. Okay, let me bring my towel in just so I can clear the decks. So then I can show you the difference. So this is how it started. So this was our piece before we added any ink or colour. I'm a little bit on the wrong, can't I? And so this is the piece before we added any of the colour. This is after we've added some of the white ink, and we've also added some splashes, and we've also added a little bit of Wink Stella in places. So you can see the difference. It just starts to sort of pop out of the card. And then of course we do have our finished card here. So it's done exactly the same. Colours obviously might be different in different places, because of obviously you can't sort of, I've got a little bit more of the pebbled path I think here, but you can't sort of dictate where those colours are going to go necessarily. But that's what I love about sort of a mottled background, because it kind of, it does allow you to sort of do different things with it. So that is our first card. Oops, I've splattered my computer, I can see. So the next one I'm going to show you is this one here. So this is using the other embossing folder. So this is actually the Eucalyptus embossing folder itself. So again, I've stuck with the colour theme because I wanted to keep with those colours throughout for you, so that you could kind of see. I have got one slightly different at the end I can show you, but I just wanted to kind of show you how to do this one. So this time I have a piece of Lost Lagoon card. So just a normal piece of Lost Lagoon, okay? Now what I want to do is I want to try and add some depth into my edges here. So I'm going to take just a blending brush, two in fact, make sure I've got the right ones. So I have Lost Lagoon first of all, and then I have Pretty Peacock. So again, using my non-porous surface, I'm just going to pick up some ink, and I'm always going to start off my page and then move into the edges. Now this is colour on colour, so it's going to be quite subtle, but we do want to build up that colour around those edges. And the beauty of using a non-porous surface is that you can go back and pick up the rest of the ink. Whereas if you were doing it on like a piece of scrap paper, then obviously the ink soaks into that and it's going to disappear. So by doing it onto your mat, it means that you can pick up all of that colour and really sort of use it to its full potential. Anyone else in Team Lost Lagoon, or is it just me? I love it, absolutely love it. I was so chuffed when it came back. Again, I'm just building up and I'm leaving this centre section nice and light. Okay, so that's my centre section. And then I'm going to go over to Pretty Peacock. I've got a different blending brush for Pretty Peacock. I have got a little bit of glitter on there, unfortunately. Not my doing, I might add. But hey, what's wrong with a bit of glitter, eh? So this time I'm going to build up at the top and just a little bit down the side. So I'm not going to do everywhere. I'm literally doing the top section and just a little bit down each side. And you can see how I can pick this ink up, because this is quite a dark ink, so it's always going to go a little bit darker a lot quicker. So this is adding ink prior to any kind of embossing or anything like that. Okay, so I've added my ink to there. So now what I want to do is emboss. So this one obviously is, the embossing goes right to the very top. So I'm going to just do it a couple of mil down from that edge. And just make sure that you're embossing, not debossing. We've all done that, I'm sure. So the easy way to remember is always to have the Stampin' Up logo at the top. And you can guarantee then that you'll get embossed. If you want it debossed, then it goes at the bottom. All right, so nice, easy way to remember. I'm just popping this through my machine. Pop it out so you can see. I mean, it's beautiful as it is in lots of respects. It's a lovely sort of pattern and you can see it, but to me I want to enhance that. So I don't know if you noticed on the card itself, but it actually has a bit of a pinky tone to it. So to do the pinky tone, I literally got ink and white ink everywhere. I literally took my Moody Mauve and put a tiny bit on my block. And then I'm going to add, oh, excuse me. A little tip as well is to keep these bottles upside down. I've had this one laying down just for a few moments. There's plenty in it, but if you, because of its consistency, it's always best to keep it upside down, and then you kind of get the right colour, get the right, what's the words I'm trying to say? So it doesn't make noises when I squeeze it. Oh God, I'm getting myself in deeper, aren't I? Anyway, let's move on. So you can see I've added the white, and I love the way this happens. Can you see it's picking up all that colour and just bringing it into that white? Okay. So I'm probably just going to use my little palette knife to just bring in some of that colour, and I want it to turn nice and pink. So add as little or as much of the ink as you want, just to add a little bit of colour. Okay, so I'm going to do exactly the same thing. This time I'm just picking up that pinky colour. And I'm going to do exactly the same. Now, that is looking quite white, okay? So you're not going to see that pinky colour. So let's pull in some more, okay? We want to make sure that when we do this, and you'll see it's starting to go pink. So again, really soft circular motions, hardly any pressure. We're literally just picking up that embossed area. So you can turn your white ink into any colour you want to. So I know eucalyptus doesn't come in pink, I know that. But it's artistic license, we can do whatever colour we like, can't we? So there you see. So I've got quite a lot to show you, so I won't continue with this one all the way through, but you get the idea that you can actually colour to enhance those embossed areas. And like the white, you will need to go back and probably do a second layer, just because it dulls right down once it's dry. So just pick that out. And then once it's dry, sometimes I go back and add a little third layer, but only in certain places, so it kind of brings it together, and just sort of you get those different shadows and things going on. So can you see? So now that one is really sort of beginning to pop out the page, but it does have a slight pinky tone to it. I'm guessing the camera's not picking up the best, to be honest, but I don't know whether if I come closer or whether I'm just going to distort it even more. But it is very, very subtly pink as opposed to white. So again, if I bring the card forward, you can see where that pinkiness is coming through. All right. So we've done white, and now we have done add in colour. So now I want to look at another sort of technique, but the same technique that we're using. But this time we're going to use DSP. So we've already created our own DSP effectively, but we're now going to actually use proper DSP. So I'm using the Winter Meadow DSP, which is also another one of my favourites at the moment. So I'll show you the card in a minute, but I'm going to show you the paper first. So this is on the reverse of these really beautiful berries, and it's got this lovely pretty peacock sort of background to it, and it's very mottled, so depending on what sort of piece you get, you'll get a different effect, whichever one you're going to use. But I really loved this, and I'm going to emboss this straight away. And this time I'm going to be using the Snowflake Sky embossing folder, which is part of the Very Cute suite, I think. But it's so versatile and so useful. So I'm going to pop in my piece of paper. I'm not too worried. This is very random, this print. So I'm just going to pop it through my machine again. So if I open that up, so you can just about see probably the embossed areas. So they're quite subtle. You don't really notice a massive amount. So now what I want to do is bring my splodge mat back in, and I'm going to use my Whisper White ink. Now, because I've got no moisture and I've got no colour on here, I'm quite happy to scrape my ink pad across. Now, can you see how it's starting to pick up those snowflakes? Just do it gently. If you get little streaks like this, once they're dry, you're not going to notice them, okay? So just using the edge of my ink pad, I'm just adding some whiteness to those embossed areas. Okay, that's my little doggy walking backwards, pitter patter. So again, I'm going to take a tiny bit of the white, not a lot, These go a long way, these bottles. I'm going to take another little Q-tip, and I'm just going to go over the main snowflakes. So this is another good way to use your embossing folders, but with your DSP. So you might have a type of background you want to do that has some subtle embossing, and you can just make it pop. I've left these ones white, of course, but as I just demonstrated, you can add any colour. So depending on what you're using, you can add any colour you want to. And if you wanted to, you could add a little bit of white to some of the larger dots. It's entirely up to you. Have a play and see what you want to do. So can you see how that has lifted that plainish bit, although it was mottled, but this plainish bit of DSP has suddenly sort of come to life a little bit. So let me show you the card that I've made using that very technique, and this one is made using the Joy of Noel. I love this suite, but I wanted to change the colourway, so I haven't gone for the traditional reds and greens. I've gone for these beautiful tones of Moody Mauve, Pretty Peacock and Lost Lagoon again, and you can just see how those little snowflakes just sort of stand out a little bit, and it just sort of brings them to life a little bit, really. Okay, so I've got one more. So next one I'm going to do is I just need a piece of white. So again, just basic white, and this time I'm going to use the Twisted Rope embossing folder. This is quite a detailed embossing folder. So it's quite it's a lot deeper, I think, than a lot of the others, but it's really detailed. There's a lot of information going on there. But I want to emboss it straight away, just as it is. Okay, so I'm just going to pop it into my folder. Okay, so as you can see, it is quite a deep emboss. I don't know whether it's just because of the rope pieces, I don't know, but it does seem a lot deeper than some of them. I know it's a 3D embossing folder, but then so are the others, so that's not the explanation. And this time I'm bringing in a couple of other colours. I'm bringing in Pecan Pie and Copper Clay. So Pecan Pie is sort of a browny, goldy sort of colour, where Copper Clay has got those lovely reddy sort of terracotta type tones coming through it. And what I want to do is just to emboss, sponge directly onto my embossing. Now again, I want this to be quite subtle to start with, so I need to make sure I'm not putting too much pressure onto my actual piece. So again, starting with Pecan Pie, start off your desk, especially if it's a darker colour, and then you can gradually bring that colour in. And you can see it's starting to pick up all those lovely rope textures. Oh, my nose is starting to run now. Definitely talking too much. Okay. So quite subtle to begin with. Don't be afraid to add layers as opposed to going in too heavy-handed. I think we're all inclined sometimes to add a little bit too much pressure because we want to get the colour down, and then we find, oops, that was a bit too much pressure. I'm sure we've all done it. I've done it myself, I know for sure. But again, a non-porous surface really helps with that, because it actually prevents sort of the brush getting stuck. It moves nice and smoothly, so hopefully that won't happen. Now I just want to run this out to this other edge, but I'm literally not picking up any other ink off the pad. I want to use whatever surplus ink I have just to make it really subtle on this edge. Okay, maybe I just want to add a little bit more in here. I can always come back and add more as well, so just remember that you don't need to, you know, that be your final go in, as it were. So as I say, copper clay. So this has got those lovely ready sort of terracotta sort of tones to it. I'm going straight over this because it's a darker colour. It's not going to show. You can see those lovely terracotta. Now, be gentle because this one really, it does colour really quickly. Think of it as your real red or your cherry cobbler. It's a real quick colour one, so you just need to bear that in mind. Just building that up really slowly. Okay. Now I do want to go back and add a little bit more pecan pie. I'll do this over here where it's away from the other ink. And I have gone a bit heavy there. Can you see me telling you not to go heavy? And I have gone heavy. So if that happens, just try and blend the colours together a little bit. We're going to have some decoration on here anyway. I will show you in a second. Okay. Let's move that out of the way. So again, I'm going to take some of my white ink. Time runs away, doesn't it? And again, I'm going to pick up my cotton pad, or cotton bud, I should say, and I'm going to work this over the top. Now, it looks really white at the moment, but trust me, it will settle right down in a moment. And what I love about this on here is that it actually brings through all the rope details, so you can begin to start seeing them pop off the page. And as I say, if you get any parts that really go white, once they're dry, you'll find that they will go down, so don't panic too much. And what I like about this is that it can sort of, it kind of blends in with the colours. So where this dark patch is, I can knock that back a little bit with my white. I'm not going to do it all over. I'm literally going to do it sort of at an angle. And I'll show you the card I made in a second. This is quite a solid emboss in this one, so it's quite nice to kind of add some detail to it, not just leave it as an embossed, although like everyone else I love just an embossed background. But I do think they're one of the things that sometimes get overlooked a little bit, or people buy them and they're not really sure what to do with them other than put a bit of paper through them. But there are lots of different techniques, and no doubt at some point we will cover some more techniques in the Mojo for you. Okay, so you can see it's started to knock that back now, so the colours are starting to dull down a little bit, but you're getting more detail onto the card. If I lift it a little bit, hopefully you'll be able to see it better. Okay, so once that's dry, that will really sort of dull down, and you'll sort of get the overall effect. So let me show you the card that I have made with this one. This one's for the men. Well, not necessarily the men, actually, it can be women as well. But I love the fishing set. So this is Gone Fishing, and I've used the DSP to cut my little fishes from it. I've done the background just as I've shown you, so it's really quite subtle, but you can see now how it's got that sort of rope effect, is sort of tonal. And then I have used just some metallic elements from the dies and some little of the 20, 23, 25 dots, I think they are, the in colour dots. So it's kind of a, it's not just for the pretty cards, you can use it for sort of all sorts of occasions and all sorts of different things really. So let me pour them in for you. Let me just have a quick clean before I put my arm in something I shouldn't. Okay, so this is the one we started with. So as you can see, this one is a lot less, it's more subtle because we've got those white gaps within our actual page. So it's more subtle. It's going to be subtle because we've added tonal colours, and then also you'll also get the twinkle from that Winker Stella as well. So it's really one of those sort of what I call like the really pretty cards. And then this one is using that other eucalyptus embossing folder, but remember this is the one we used with the coloured. So we coloured the white craft ink just to give it a little bit of depth, a little bit of colour, so that you could sort of see how you can mix those in. Now, if you're mixing colour, you could use your inkers. I would probably say they're probably a little bit wet. Again, it's that same thing with the actual craft ink. If it's too wet, it won't dry. So it's really, I would say always use your ink pads or even your markers. You could use just a normal stamping marker to put your colour, remember to put your colour down first, of course, and then mix in your white craft ink. So then we had the Merry Christmas one. This one is a different size. This is our standard size here in the UK, so this is our C6. So you can see the difference between them. Width-wise, it's very, very small. There's hardly any difference whatsoever. But as you can see, length-wise, we've probably got just over 1/4 of an inch longer, I would say. So that's so I can actually send it because I can't get American envelopes here. So so it's quite nice to be able to use some of the cards. And then finally we have the fishing card. I loved doing this one actually. It's kind of nice to be able to do something that's not Christmas at the moment because we're all in Christmas mode, aren't we? So it's quite nice to be able to do something else. So I hope you like that today. As I say, it's just one of many, many techniques that we can use with our beautiful embossing folders. And we do have some really lovely, gorgeous ones. But I think, unfortunately, they don't photograph well. So they sometimes get missed in the catalogue. That's my theory, because sometimes I've not noticed them before now. So recommendation, whenever you get a new catalogue, flick to the back where they have all the bits and pieces in order, and just look at the embossing folders and see what ones are there. I must admit I missed the eucalyptus completely. I don't know why, but I missed these, and it was only when I was looking through the actual index, because I was looking for embossing folders to do this technique, and I thought, oh, how did I miss those? So it's easy to do. So make sure you look out for them. And I will see you again soon. Now we are going into a natural break now. So if you want to go and get yourself something to eat or a drink or whatever, that's fine. You go do that. Audra will be back in an hour or just over an hour. And I'm sure she's got something amazing to share with us today. Me, I'm going to go sit back in front of that fire and then I am going to sit and watch the rest of the presentations. So have fun. Thank you for joining us and we'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye.